The shutdown is over. It happened late last night. President Trump from the Oval Office signed it, said it was time for this to all be over. There was applause. There was a lot of conversation that led into it, saying none of this really had to happen. But of course, here we are. It is over. I think this is a good day for America in that sense. However, it's not a good day, it feels like, for the Democrats, as the far left groups, the AOCs, the squads, are saying, we cannot believe this shutdown is over. You know, they called for the shutdown to end. And then when the shutdown got too close to ending, they go, how dare you? So much so they are calling to primary their own party members who decided to very lightly cave, if you will.
Should Chuck Schumer stay as minority leader?
I think what is so important for folks to understand is that this problem is bigger than one person, and it actually is bigger than the minority leader in the Senate. A leader is a reflection of the party. And Senate Democrats have selected their leadership to represent them. And so the question needs to be bigger than just one person. We have several Senate primaries this cycle. I know I'm being asked about New York. That is years from now. I have to remind my own constituents because they think that this election is this year. We actually do have Senate elections this year. And my hope is that people across this country actually participate in their primary elections in selecting their leadership. Thank you.
You didn't really answer the question.
Very direct, to be honest, saying, you know, there are a lot of different primaries this cycle, and we need to start looking at who can go. I mean, that is pretty wild that is coming from a pretty major leader in the party calling for this. And Jordan, we know historically, in terms of, you can maybe break it even down even from a political point of view, the idea of unseating someone who has been there for a while, it is always a gigantic uphill battle.
It is, unless, and it's still an uphill battle, but you've got this whole new movement. I mean, the fact that a 34, I think, you know, turning 35, Mamdani in New York took out Cuomo, who was very close early on. He was leading way ahead, had lots of money, and kind of Republicans and Democrats were okay with him if you live in New York City. Yeah. And then he just does this blowout win. So she's saying, well, hey, if you can do that, if you can take on dynasties in states like New York, we can take on, you know, some senators who have made it, who were... Yeah,
they can do the reverse of MAGA in their own party.
Will has the names, too, of the ones that actually voted to reopen who are up for re-election.
Well, and it's interesting because you know what they did here very specifically. Dick Durbin and Jeanne Shaheen are the only two that voted for it to reopen in the Senate. They're both retiring. So that's going to be a primary to see who will be that incumbent replacement. They were very strategic with that, knowing they would get the ire from the AOCs. But there's 13 Democrats up for re-election. I think what she's banking on is that if you can not flip the seat, but instead flip who the incumbent will be, then you can take out the leadership because the progressives of the party are not happy.
It's wonderful because in midterm elections, when you have the White House, the House, and the Senate, traditionally that midterm, you lose one of those. Not necessarily both, but one. And it's been mostly focused on the House. The Senate's looking pretty good for Republicans. So maybe that's why AOC says this is the time to take the risk. But if you can create inter-Democrat fighting at the statewide level, that filters down to those House races in the key states that they're trying to win, to flip, because then you've got half that candidate's supporters saying, I'm against the current senator, I want the radical. And then the other, so what is that local, the one running for House of Representatives, do they have to figure out if they're going to endorse the challenger to an incumbent senator? It could be a mess for Democrats, but I think what AOC is, she's making the long-term play to take the party the way of her and Mamdani.
When you think about this and the repercussions of it, one, it shows that it was the Democrats themselves that wanted to keep the government shut down. They wanted this suffering and pain on the American people, the military not getting paid, the food stamp benefits, the SNAP program not going out, and all of the things that come with that, the airline, the air traffic controller crisis that we are facing. They wanted to continue that, and their option now is not to say, let's try to make things better, let's try to legislate, let's try to find compromise. Instead, it's let's get rid of our leaders in the Senate and go a different path forward where we can just do whatever we want and take over. Yeah. They would still have the government shut down if it were up to them.
Yes, I mean, I think that's what people need to understand is that the SNAP program, you wouldn't be getting your benefits. The federal employees would miss more paychecks. The FAA would have been a disaster during Thanksgiving. It's now looks like it will ramp up so where it'll at least be status quo on Thanksgiving, which isn't always the easiest time, but better than them canceling, 20% of flights or even booking flights, saying you might show up, but you don't even go. And Logan, you've even had experience with that this week coming up. So I just think that when you combine all of this, you say, and we talked about it, they got nothing from this except for some agreements on some votes that they're not going to win. It's very, I think for the American people, they may have tried to, they've hurt the economy. So, and if that does hurt President Trump, that hurts Republicans, but they own this, and the kind of the AOCs of the world and all of them coming out and saying that helps us when we say it, because the base of the Democrats are saying, no, we got nothing at all.
All right, yeah, and I want to bring in Mark Kelly here from the ACLJ in Washington, D.C. Obviously, a big moment for everyone, but I'm sure things are changing there drastically. I'll kick over to Will, and then I'll just take from there.
Last night we saw a memo go out from the White House, from the OMB, that said, hey, tomorrow, November 13th, which is now today, start reopening the government. Everyone needs to go back to work. Obviously, some of these departments and agencies will take some time to, catch up on back work and get to where they are. But what does it look like for the government reopening right now?
Yes, I think what you're seeing is people coming back to work. It was interesting that memo went out last night at about 10:30. And so I imagine some workers woke up this morning to the news that they were going back to work. But they're going to come in, and as I said yesterday, I think on the show, 75% of workers were already working. So there's going to be back work for those who were not in the office, but they're going to get back up to speed shortly. I saw news today that about Sunday, they believe the paychecks will start going out, and those will be completed by Wednesday. So those who are working without pay, those who are furloughed, will all be paid. And you're going to see things go back to work. I think the FAA has said that it's going to take about a week to get back to normal. And so hopefully by next weekend, when people start traveling for Thanksgiving, that the airports won't be seeing the delays and the cancellations that they were this past week.
I think what's also fascinating is you're starting to see the infighting break out among the Democrats on the Hill. I know you've spent a lot of time as a Hill staffer working in various positions and high levels on the Hill. What do you make of this, what we're seeing now? Is this just reactionary, wanting to get their TV time, wanting to show that they are the leader of the party? Or do you think this does real damage to their party going forward, the way that we're seeing the AOC types speak out and say, hey, we got to get rid of our leadership. They failed us here by failing to keep the government closed?
That's an interesting question, and I guess we'll see it play out as we go forward. I mean, the polls did indicate the Democrats were faring a little bit better in the shutdown with the public, but we don't know what that means long term. And I think there were some adults in the room, so to speak, in D.C. who said, this has gone on long enough. There's starting to be real pain with the SNAP program. There's starting to be real pain at the airports. The federal workers aren't being employed are paid, I should say. So, they're going to see how this plays out long term. I think Chuck Schumer knew that there were members of his caucus that wanted to negotiate a deal to end this. You had people like Tim Kaine, who has a high percentage of federal workers in Virginia. And you have people like Mark Warner, who voted against the deal. But I think he was probably in the kind of hope no or hope yes, vote no category. Mark Warner's on the ballot in 2026, and he didn't want to draw a primary opponent. And that's a real risk right now when you have people like AOC and Bernie Sanders out there saying they're going to recruit Mamdani-like candidates to run against them.
I think we should play this from Senator John Fetterman, who had been consistently for reopening the government. He said something to the effect of, it used to be a part of our party platform that we have to keep the government open. But he is also criticizing the party, but for a different reason than AOC. Let's go ahead and roll bite one from Senator John Fetterman on CBS.
I would like to take the opportunity to remind, I vote a 91% Democratic line. And if Democrats have a problem with somebody that votes 91% of the same times as you are, more than 9 out of 10 times, then maybe our party has a bigger problem, and maybe it's not the big tent party that people need and we want to have to win that going forward for that.
So what you start to see here, Jordan, is cracks in their base.
91% is not good enough for this.
Right, that's a moderate now. I mean, if you're 91% of the time in line with your party.
For conservatives, you want your people elected to vote 100%. But strategically, you look in states that are tougher to win.
Not realistic.
Susan Collins, people like that. Better to have them than somebody who's on the left, who's not going to vote with you 90% of the time, but is going to vote against you 95 or 98% of the time. But the fact is, I don't think 91% is good enough for the left anymore.
Well, and if you probably look at those votes, if it's 91% of the time, it's probably Israel and the government shutdown are the two things he voted against his party on.
Yeah.
I mean, in reality, the 91% figure is all of the Democrat ideology and policy perspective
look what
that
they've
he's
done to
voting
him.
with.
They tried to say he's lost his mind because he's a Jewish senator who supports Israel and wanted to keep the government open, and he's lost his mind. Before, the Democrats have said that, and before they played down and said, no, he's fine to be in the Senate. So it's so interesting how
that all switched completely. It went from, he was perfectly fine when he was clearly struggling and having a lot of issues early on. He's gotten better.
Many of us would have
but they ignored that. But as soon as he started to have any kind of leanings that would be not right in line with the far, far left of the party, he now was the enemy.
Right. You support Israel. Something's got to be wrong with him.
Yeah.